Our event will be starting in a few minutes. If you can tell us where you're calling from and how do you feel about today's event, you can use the chat window to tell us where you're calling from. I guess we have a very wide audience from all over the world. And also if you can tell us how you feel about today's event. So for example, I'm calling from San Francisco Bay Area and I'm super excited about the event today. So use the chat and tell us where you're calling from and how you're feeling now. Hello, everyone. We're giving people a few minutes to join. While we're waiting, feel free to let us know where you're calling from and maybe one word about your feeling for today's event. Great. We have people from Bay Area, North San Jose, and feeling awesome. We also have people from Hsinchu in Taiwan. And Troy, one of our speakers, is from Portland, Oregon, and he's excited to share and learn. Cool, this is awesome. We will be giving people a few last minutes to grab your coffee, or maybe if it's not your morning time, you'll probably want a beer. Please do so, and our event will be starting shortly. Oh, wow. Hi, John from Nigeria. We're excited to have you here too. And also, just for we also have people joining us from YouTube live streaming, Facebook live streaming. So just want to say hi to you. Hi, Ernest from Kenya. Wow, I actually don't know what time is it in Kenya now. Hi, Dave. Hi, Ian. Wow, 3 a.m. That's impressive. Actually, one of our speakers also is joining us in the middle of his night. I believe it's also pretty late for Alon, one of our speakers. But 3 a.m. is a real dedication. We really appreciate it. Well, we have more folks joining us. If you just join now, we are asking people where they are calling from. And also, if you can share one word about how you feel about today's event. Delighted. Thank you, Alon. Cool. Our event will be started in 1 minute. So last chance for your coffee, beer, or whatever you need for the awesome event today.
Recording in progress.
Great. We have a few people from Taiwan too. Hello, hello. Welcome. Thank you, Alice. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event today. We're so excited to see everyone here all over the world. We have people in Zoom as well as people watching from live stream on Facebook and YouTube. So welcome, welcome. It might be your Friday late afternoon, middle of your Saturday night, or like Saturday morning, but no matter where you are calling from, happy weekend to you all. My name is Peggy Pan, and I'm your moderator today. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I was born and grew up in Taiwan, and I moved to the US 4 years ago for my business degree at Stanford. And now I'm serving as a product marketing manager at a company called Uscreen, where we focus on creator economy. So super happy to be here as your moderator today. And next slide, please. So some of you might have joined us last week at the same time, but today's the second day of our US and Taiwan High-Tech Forum. And last week at the same time, we have speakers joining us to talk about semiconductors and electric vehicles and their impact on the future of supply chain and infrastructure. Today, we also have amazing speakers, but we're going to talk about Web3, crypto, blockchain. Those are very hot topics in various industries. And hopefully after today's event, we're able to learn more and demystify those emerging technologies. Super excited. Before we start the event, I would love to introduce a few important organizations to make this event possible. First is our co-organizer, DigiTimes. I believe a lot of you have heard of DigiTimes and have read their publication somewhere. As a leading media platform in Taiwan, DigiTimes has invested a lot in researching technology trends and their market applications. If you go to the next slide, their new edition of DigiTimes Asia is a good example of their continuous dedication to bringing insights to the regional audience. We appreciate their support for our event today. And also we have some of DigiTimes staff joining us live. So just say hi to them and welcome. We also have another co-host, National Science and Technology Council in Taiwan. So NSTC is a bridge between policymakers and industries, and they've put a lot of effort into encouraging more industrial innovation. So for example, their recent initiative, Taiwan Employment Gold Card, allows international talents to work and stay in Taiwan. So if you're interested in learning more about it and the benefits of having an employment gold card and how to get one, you can scan the QR code on the left of your screen to learn more. Next, we also have our amazing community partners to help promote our event. So InnoFX is one of the biggest startup exhibitions in Asia to help startups match international capital, manufacturing partners, market channels, as well as media resources. It happens every year in Taiwan at the same time as Computex. TSIA, Taiwan Semiconductor Industry Association, has been a long-time partner for this high-tech forum. So we are honored to have their support again this year. Thank you, TSIA. And TEDx Woodside is another great partner. They're going to have their TEDx event next year in January. So if you're interested, please visit their website to learn more. Last but not least, IEEE Young Professionals, the community focused on supporting young professionals in their early careers in tech. There's plenty of benefits to joining the network, so make sure you check them out if you are interested. So thank you, our community partners. All right, and you might be wondering who's the key organizer behind today's event. So let's welcome the president of NATEA and the co-chair of this forum, Joseph Chen, to introduce NATEA to us and give us a few brief words. Welcome, Joseph.
All right. Thank you, Peggy, for the exciting opening and your introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to where you are. This is Joseph Chen from NATEA-Silicon Valley. On behalf of our organization and the program committee of this event, I would like to welcome you to the second day of the 2022 US Taiwan High-Tech Forum. Next page, please. Yes. Our organization has hosted this event ever since 1998, and we are fortunate to continue the endeavor of having the 25th one by virtual event despite the pandemic. Also, I would like to introduce our nonprofit organization, NATEA. Stands for North America Taiwanese Engineering and Science Association, which was founded in 1991 at Silicon Valley by a group of Taiwanese engineers and scientists. We are very glad that 30 years later today, the missions are carried over and we continue to develop platforms and playgrounds for the community to learn new technology trends, to expand networks for professional and personal growth. Several examples like the annual flagship events, the High-Tech Forum last Friday and today, the Startup Entrepreneurial Forums, as well as several professional working group events and seminars like a Women's Summit, Career Salon Meetup. If you are interested in learning more about NATEA, please visit us at natea.org. I believe most of you also attended our Day 1 event last Friday and enjoyed excellent talks from the industry leaders. We really appreciate your time spending with us again today and believe the program today will be another informative and enjoyable one toward the blockchain and crypto domains. So with that, I will turn the podium back to Peggy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joseph. And as you may see on the screen, you can scan QR codes to join the Facebook and our LinkedIn page. Again, it's always amazing to me personally learning this forum is entering the 25th edition of it. Can you imagine doing it for 25 years? So it's really amazing to see what NATEA is trying to achieve with their mission. A few housekeeping stuff before we start today's event. So you can download the program book from the event website to learn about the speakers and their backgrounds from the program book. So please do so. And also, we're using Zoom for today's event. So make sure you can always use the Q&A function on Zoom to submit your questions. And our team will be live monitoring those questions. And I will help ask your questions to our speakers during the Q&A time. If you have comments, thoughts, or just want to thank our awesome speakers, feel free to use the chat button and interact with us. All right, so today we've prepared 3 incredible speeches brought by experts in different domains. We will also have a panel discussion with excellent speakers at the end. So it's a very exciting event. So make sure you stay with us till the end of the event and make sure you use chat and Q&A to submit your questions or interact with us. All right, so please join me welcome our first keynote speaker of today, Alon Webman, co-founder and CEO of Chain Reaction. So Alon is a seasoned executive leader with more than 3 decades of experience in cutting-edge sectors such as data, cloud, semiconductor, and of course, blockchain. And Alon will be sharing with us the topic compute infrastructure for the next generation of blockchain and privacy. Before we start, I want to invite Alon to maybe come to the stage and unmute yourself. And I know now is the middle of the night for you because Alon is joining us from Israel. So how are you, Alon? And thank you so much for joining us at your 2 a.m. We really appreciate it. And yeah, so do we have Alon online already?
Yes, I'm here. And
hi.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Alon. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. It's super late for you, I know. But feel free to take over and start your presentation.
We will do. Just a second. And, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and congratulations, NATEA, for the 25th year. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you for inviting me today. I'll be speaking about compute infrastructure for the next generation of blockchain and privacy. In today's world, it's all about data and data processing. Where the amount of data increases exponentially, having data is not enough. It is all about what we do with it. For data to be valuable, it must be processed in real time. Just like it's not relevant if you get the news of last week. The same goes for data. Big data processing is a set of techniques to access large-scale data and extract useful information for decision-making. Big data is often characterized by the 3 V's: large volumes of data, wide variety of data types, and the velocity at which the data is generated, collected, and processed. The goal is obtaining real-time actionable insight, driving the competitive advantage and better decision-making of organizations. This allows them to win opportunity, be the best, and be the first to market. It's all about time to value and time to market. Hi, everyone. I'm Alon Webman, CEO and co-founder of Chain Reaction. Chain Reaction is a semiconductor company that accelerates data processing in real time for data center and cloud. We design high-speed, high-performance, low-power compute products for the next generation of blockchain and privacy tech. Today, I would like to talk about both blockchain and privacy. Let's start with blockchain. We are seeing that blockchain is a huge market growing rapidly with technologies that are changing countless industries. Here are some of the trends that we see. It is a huge market with 68% CAGR forecast period of 2021 till 2030, and it is predicted to become more than $70 billion by 2030. We witnessed huge investment in the last few years from finance and banking, semiconductor, software, and more. And from the biggest players, the Samsung, Alphabet, PayPal, and others. The biggest industry and corporation have already adopted blockchain tech, whether it's telecom, industrial, energy, financial, or healthcare. And there are massive applications that are using blockchain every day, from voting to IoT, healthcare, to Bitcoin mining, and many others. And we in Chain Reaction decided to focus on our first product on Bitcoin mining. And why? Because it is a $110 billion underserved and undersupplied market. And currently, there is a demand for approximately 10 million machines, while the existing players combined can serve only a fraction of the demand. Like many industries, we witness both bear and bull market. In a bull market, it's all about capacity and lead time. So revenues are being capped by the ability to manufacture and sell in a short lead time. In a bear market, it is all about performance and efficiency. It costs an enterprise miner less than $6,000 to mine Bitcoin with an efficient machine. And therefore, as for today, it is a very profitable market. So it is a key for being a sustainable and profitable miner to have continuous supply of efficient machine, so the demand for machine doesn't go down even in a bear market like we see today. At Chain Reaction, we play on both. We design the most advanced and efficient machine for a bear market, while we have the capacity for manufacturing for a bull one. We are well positioned. We just taped out our first ASIC and expected engineering sample to be by the end of the year and to start manufacturing in high volume at the first half of 2023. And I would like to talk now about data privacy, what it is, what are the challenges, and how we can make the next technological leap to overcome this issue. So, why is data privacy important? Because our privacy matters to us. We want a medical record to be private. We want our financial transaction and shopping habits to be private. As individuals, we want to control our own data. Businesses rely on privacy for their competitive advantage, from oil and gas application to manufacturing, automobile, and cell phone design. Governments rely on privacy for everything, from research to science and exploration, from military to defense. Private data is the 21st century most valuable resource, and therefore, privacy tech is a valuable tool. It keeps our private data private. But we need not only to think about today, but also about the future, when the quantum era will be here and quantum machine will be able to get anywhere and to break almost into everything. But let's focus on today. To be competitive, businesses must lead product innovation, value, and performance. They must continuously modernize their operation, their services, and their compute infrastructure, including system and workload that support it all. Otherwise, they will fail. However, not all businesses can afford to build an advanced specialized on-premise data center. But what COVID-19 taught us all is the economics of lease versus buy. Businesses still need accessibility and availability to the best compute, unlimited resources, and the most advanced technologies, and this is found in the cloud. And that's why we see the migration to the cloud happening all the time. As more legacy data centers and businesses are moving their workload to the cloud, it becomes a $500 billion yearly industry growing at a rate of 22% CAGR year to year. However, there are three problems currently facing the future of a modernized compute in the cloud, and I will discuss them in the next few slides. The first one is that the cloud is untrusted. While you can secure your data when it's on-premise, when you migrate it to the cloud, it is no longer secure. And why is that the case? Because when you want to perform data processing in the cloud, you must first bring the data, decrypt it, process it, then encrypt it and store it again. That means that during the processing time, your private data is as a plain text, can be viewed, accessed, and stolen by malicious users. This you can see on the left side of this slide. The right side of this slide, the solution for the future, on that I will talk in the next few minutes. And that brings me to the second problem, energy cost that rises. Right now, we are in global energy crisis. But regardless, as you can see from the table on the left, data center demand for energy from 2015 to 2021 doubled and almost tripled. For example, medium-sized government or financial data center energy bill used to be about $40 million a year, and now prices are double that, and it's not going to get better. The huge OPEX and CAPEX costs fuel the trends of moving operation to the cloud. Some data centers have electricity costs that are even higher than the entire country. You can see it on the right side of the slide. But what we need to remember is that for cloud provider to be a solution, they still need to be cost-effective. And that's what brings me to the next problem, the need for speed. As compute becomes more complicated and involves more data, the acceleration required increases dramatically. CPU and GPU only maybe can achieve up to 200 times the acceleration if you take a single general purpose processor that can be simple operation like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division as a one acceleration, as a baseline. If we go to a GPU or FPGA, they can achieve up to 200x and be capable of more advanced operation, such as linear regression, as we can see here on the slide. On the system level, when we have optimized software, storage, memory, and networking, those solutions can do AI, machine learning, and even deep learning. But if you go into the extreme complex compute that is required for the privacy-enhanced technologies, such as fully homomorphic encryption, zero-knowledge proof, or other advanced cryptography that are required to do operation on top of encrypted data, this will not suffice. What we need is a real novel technology. So now that we covered the problem, I would like to talk a little bit about the solution. And I want to break it down one by one. For securing the cloud, what is required is first, a trusted environment that is private and secure. 1 million time acceleration, this is required for the real-time compute. And an energy-efficient solution that can be adopted at scale and deployed. And in chain reaction, we want to do it all. We want to revolutionize access to private data for the biggest global industry, help sellers sell more by enabling big data analytics, AI, machine learning, deep learning, and as we discussed, privacy-enhancing technologies. And this is the holy grail of the cloud. Once the cloud is secure, the most valuable industries and enterprises can move into the cloud. Big pharma and medical, financial institution, and government, they all want to transform their data into value, knowledge, and insights. And that's where the holy grail is, transforming an untrusted environment into a trusted environment. This is going to be the most disruptive technology of the future in cloud. And everyone wants to be first. Intel, Microsoft, IBM, Google, Meta, privacy in the cloud means that this $500 billion industry can reach 2 to 3 trillion as more and more applications move to the cloud. And now I want to go back to the slide that I discussed before and to show how it's going to be the solution for the future. As you can see on the right side of the slide, there are multiple secure endpoints that can encrypt the data. They move the encrypted data into the cloud. It is still encrypted, and therefore it's secured. And now, with privacy-enhanced technologies, they can do computation, data analytics, enjoy cloud services on top of the encrypted data. The result is encrypted and therefore secured. Then you move it into a trusted zone and decrypt it. And this is how the future of cloud and privacy will look like. And now, so we know what we want and how the future is going to look like, and we know what the hurdle to get there. What needed is a dedicated solution to accelerate privacy-enhancing technologies. With a dedicated ASIC, our privacy processor can reach more than 10,000 times the performance over a strong server, and with optimized software, can reach more than 100,000 times the performance. And by that, enable customers to move their private data into the cloud, and by doing so, solving industry's biggest bottleneck. And now I would like to talk about the last piece of the puzzle. As a CEO, it is my job to find a market problem and to try to design a solution that doesn't exist yet. But we can't do it alone. Neither can Intel, NVIDIA, or AMD. We can envision needs of the future of people, businesses, and design the products, but without partnering with the best-in-class semiconductor players in the market, our dreams cannot become a reality. We rely on our partnership with the most advanced fabrication, manufacturing, and supply chain that we have found in Taiwan's world's leading companies. Working together, we can make the impossible possible. And thank you. And again, honored to be here. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have today.
All right, thank you so much, Alon. It was a great presentation. I love your approach of breaking down problems and provide solutions. We do have a few questions to ask you. So you mentioned that big data in the future and how important like the processing efficiency is. Can you please elaborate maybe just a little bit more on how the blockchain and related cryptographic technologies can help big data processing, and maybe give us a few use cases?
So data processing is already done and been done for a while in the cloud. The biggest problem that we witness, and that's the challenge that the cloud provider has, is how to bring into the cloud new kind of verticals that cannot use the cloud because it's untrusted. Data privacy and blockchain enables, with the technology and base technology of cryptography and advanced cryptography, to bring into the cloud new industries, and while doing that, given individual the ability to control their own data and keep it private, give businesses the ability to use all of the cloud services and tools while keeping the core competitive at secured. And last, having governments and financial institutions or big pharma bring their data into the cloud and enjoy the services, and by that, they can change the world, whether they're doing a new medicine, whether they're analyzing how to solve the weather crisis in the world, and other things that requires that strong compute. And today, because of the lack of privacy and a trusted environment in the cloud, they cannot use it. and therefore we are lagging behind in the ability to solve those issues. So privacy and acceleration, like we do in our privacy processor, will enable to do more, faster, and hopefully help us all solve some of the issues we have on the planet.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. So you also mentioned that modern or future computing will be most likely all through the cloud, right? However, the cloud has to be secured enough to be trustworthy to deal with all the private data. So assuming all the computing infrastructure will be ready by chain reaction solution in the future, what's your view on, like when this solution comes to life, what's the new opportunities for the cloud business, and what will it be looking like toward our everyday life?
So I mentioned it a little bit also in the previous answer. It allows the cloud as a strong compute and allows a lot of businesses, individuals to enjoy them without having to build up their own solution. But as we mentioned, if you want in this world to keep yourself and your data private, you have to find the right compute power that need to be accelerated in order to bring those solutions to be viable, to be used by millions of users, whether they are businesses, governments, or individual. The acceleration that we are doing will enable this technology in scale for millions and will allow doing more businesses and using the cloud as the most advanced and the most used tool for all of the different verticals, individuals, as I said, businesses, government, and verticals that at the moment cannot enjoy it and have to do a lot of investment in a market that is difficult, in economics that is difficult. The cloud provides all of them the solution at scale, and that privacy will enable everyone to enjoy it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We also have a question from the audience. So Kevin, well, first of all, he appreciates your presentation, and he has a question about the emerging decentralized storage technologies, such as Filecoin and Arweave. I hope I get the name right. So he's curious to hear from you. Do you see their potential to become an important part of cloud applications?
So one of the biggest innovations that blockchain brings is the decentralization and the fact that you can manage contracts, smart contracts, and communication without a third party to overlook of the operation. Basically gives individuals or businesses a direct access to do their business or transaction. What we do, the acceleration, is a very important part because cryptography is the core technology that allows decentralization and allows work between two parties that may not know each other. They don't have a third party to overlook the transaction, but still we want that the environment as hostile as possibly could be for those transactions to be trustful. And that's what blockchain brings to the table on this. And cryptography is a major part, and if it won't be accelerated, there won't be the ability to use the technology at scale. Blockchain has scale issue, and some of it can be solved by cryptography, whether it's by bringing performance or bringing it to be more secured. And all of it is required and will be done only when you have strong compute and acceleration.
Right, thank you for that. And actually, one of our next speakers, Clara, she's from Filecoin. So we'll be very interested to hear her view as well, maybe later in her presentation. But thank you, Kevin, for your question. So Alon, my next question to you is, Do you think would cryptographic technologies result in new set of cryptographic accelerator engine, open source protocols / APIs, or other design methods like cryptographic chipset modules in future microprocessor design? Do you see that kind of results happening from the cryptographic technologies?
So first, yes. The answer is yes. The cryptography, the advanced cryptography that we are discussing today was already invented in the 80s and the 90s. And one of the biggest problems that it didn't become commonly used was the fact that we didn't have enough strong compute to enable the cryptography to be part of the technology. What we see today, whether it's in the big players like Intel, NVIDIA, or smaller players like Chain Reaction, is that today we got into the point that we want to use cryptography, and you see that every one of them are looking for the solution, whether they're in-house or outside the companies, how to accelerate the cryptography, because we see that privacy is important and security is important, and without those acceleration, whether they're going to be embedded in a CPU, GPU, or as a side coprocessor accelerator, it's a requirement for the solutions to be valuable and available for everyone. So we see it all around, and I think that in the next few years, we see many different solutions, all of them trying to address how to have cryptography with the right performance for the scale in public cloud and also in the edge or the client. Especially if you're going to look forward into quantum era, as I mentioned, well, post-quantum resistance cryptographies are very compute intensive. So in order to have you secured as a personal in your mobile or in your edge, you will have to have strong compute in hand and acceleration to protect yourself from the quantum machines that are going to be in the market maybe in the next 10 years.
Great. Yeah, thank you. We also have a few more questions flowing from the audience. So Hans, from the audience, you mentioned the trust zone in your presentation, and he's curious to learn what's the root of the trust. Sorry, let me read his question again. What's the root of the trust for the trust zone?
So that comes back again to the cryptography. Fully homomorphic encryption, for example, allows algorithms and data analytics to run on encrypted data, and a very strong encryption that basically is also post-quantum resistant. So as long as your data is still encrypted, it is protected and secured. The homomorphic encryption allows you to run algorithms, cloud services, and data analytics and AI on top of the encrypted data. And that's exactly, the zone itself have not changed, but the way we store the data, it's what makes the difference. And store it in encrypted and not decrypted in an untrusted zone, that's what makes the difference with what we have today and how the future will look like.
Cool. Yeah, I hope that helps your question, Hans. And we also have another question from Sheng. And so he's wondering if you can kind of address again the energy issue. You probably talked about in your presentation, but he's curious, like, if you can elaborate more on how you're going to address the energy issue.
So first, it's obvious for everyone what happened in the last year, both from, for example, the war between Russia and Korea and Ukraine, and the economics, that energy become a more priced resource. And that's have an effect on both on-premise data centers and cloud provider. If you want to maintain your own data center, it will become very, very expensive. as long as you can find a different solution that will give you the same capabilities, but cheaper, then that's what you will do. It's found in the cloud. The cloud allows you not to use OpEx, but only to use the cost of what you use. The only problem is that the cloud has to be also a cost-effective solution to bring that into the public. And that's where it comes with acceleration and efficient solutions that are targeting specific vertical. You can see it when you had strong CPUs in the past in the cloud. You can see it later on when you have more and more dedicated AI solution that reduce the cost but increase the performance. And you will see it also in the world of privacy when it will come in a massive deployment, that the acceleration basically reduce the power or increase the performance. For example, if you're talking about 1 million time compute required for cryptography, think about it. You have 100 million machine in the cloud, it's equivalent to 100 server. But if you bring the acceleration to the level of 1 million, with the same cost of power, then the efficiency is in the 3 or 4 level of magnitude better than just a software solution. So this is how the acceleration have been helping, and dedicated hardware and ASICs helping reduce the power of the solution, and by that helping some of the problems that we witness with the cost of the energy that is rises in this global crisis.
Great. We have another energy efficiency related question. It's from John, our friend from calling from Nigeria, and he's asking what alternatives are being employed to cut back on the energy efficiency dilemma.
So, as I said, there's a few things that we see. The first one is bringing more efficient technologies, using more advanced processes, using more ASICs versus PGA or GPU, dedicated ASIC, and seeing more and more innovation in the architecture level and in the way you implement the design. So this is the one thing that has always been done, though, by the semiconductor industry, bringing a more efficient solution and progressing through the processes and giving a new generation every few years, like the Moore's law used to do. That's the one side. The other side is, and we can see it a lot in the Bitcoin mining industry, and probably will be addressed on the next speaker that talk about Bitcoin mining in the US, we see a lot of renewable energy use. And the combination of building data center that is optimized for renewable energy is a key to solve some of those issues. So the combination is doing efficient hardware custom design into data center that are targeting renewable energy. For example, what can be a problem in renewable energy? That you don't have the solution 24 hours a day. And you have to build up your solution and data center accordingly. So the combination of all three of them will probably reduce the energy used, or at least the energy used by polluting environment, and have by that cleaner energy and hopefully cleaner world.
Great. And we have one last question. It's an anonymous question from the audience. And so based on what you just shared, how much gap is still there based on today's CPU, GPU, SiC technologies from big corporates like Intel, AMD, NVIDIA? I don't know if you want to share a little bit of your views on the reality versus and also the gap there.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen in this kind of in the industry, all of the big players have the ability to develop any kind of solution. They have big enough team, big enough expertise, and experience of many years of bringing different solutions to the market. The biggest differentiation is usually that if you talk Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA, they will not be a first mover into the market. They usually step in strongly when the market is already been materialized and been in scale. And at that time, they will always look also for solution from outside the company versus solution inside, and make versus buy. So as they are able and have the expertise to do everything, they usually come later into the game. So here's where the differentiation is. Usually a year or two in advance, you see startups that will bring up the solution, while they have to be good enough to compete 2 years later when the big players are coming in. And this is what will differentiate between successful semiconductor companies or semiconductor companies that will not be able to compete on the market. So I would say that in general, you see 2 to 3 years difference between the startups and the big players like Intel, NVIDIA, AMD, and so on new markets. Obviously not on market that they already are their stronghold.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alon, again, for your presentation and answering all our audience questions during the middle of your night. I know it's past 3 a.m. for you, but we really appreciate you stayed up late for us, and we really enjoyed your presentation. And hope you have some great rest on your weekend. And we're really lucky to have you here.
Thank you. I was really excited, and it was worthwhile every minute of being here, especially in this night, and to see everyone, also from the guys from Nigeria, for example, that are in the same time zone. So thank you so much for inviting me, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Alon. We really appreciate it.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Awesome. Yeah, that's such a great first presentation of today. And thank you so much for all the great questions you've been sharing. If we can kindly ask you to post your questions in the Q&A instead of in chat, that will help the team just, easier to make sure your questions are not missed, because we can, it can be easy like that we miss your questions looking at the chat messages. So if you can submit your questions in the Q&A section, which you can find it on the button of the Zoom menu bar, that'll be super great. All right. So now let's move to our second speaker today. Clara Tsao is the founding officer and director of Filecoin Foundation. And Clara is a rare leader who holds experience in both the public and private sectors, including government, non-for-profit, big tech, as well as startups. It's a real challenge for me to summarize her diverse and amazing background in a few words. So I encourage all of you to get on her personal website, claratsao.com, to learn more about her stories and the exciting projects she's working on. This is also the second time Clara speaking at our High-Tech Forum. We're really glad to have her back. And today she's going to talk about Web3 in a bear market, which is a very relevant topic given the current events and news. So without further ado, let's welcome Clara to give her presentation. And the floor is yours, Clara.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for having me, and also for a second year. I will add a disclaimer that I actually haven't updated my personal site for 7 years. So all of that detail is from 2015, but I definitely need to add that to my to-do list if people are still looking at it.
So amazing.
So I wanted to start off by saying, originally I had a different title to my talk, and given the events of this week and a lot of questions people have had over just what is happening in the market, I wanted to reshape my event, really, my presentation today, really around answering questions around different bear cycles in crypto. We can also talk a little bit about what happened with FTX if the audience would like to hear more about what happened there. But I wanted to kick things off and just talk about lessons learned from the Filecoin and IPFS ecosystem, as we've gone through 4 bear cycles at this point. And for anyone that is newer to crypto, you will know that incidents like different changes in the market and these conditions are not rare. They happen every cycle, just like other industries. Unfortunately, there is just a lot of capital that's moved. And so oftentimes there might be pretty significant repercussions in certain markets. So first off, I wanted to take a step back. I think Alon did a great job in explaining cryptography, but I wanted to mention it one more time, just because I know some of this audience, this may not be necessarily a space that you are as familiar in. So most people hear about crypto, and the first thing they think about is cryptocurrency. And I wanted to really go backwards in time and think about the first time most of you guys may have heard about crypto, which was back in 2011, 2012 with coins like Bitcoin. And what cryptocurrencies usually do is they are used as an actual currency to remove intermediaries from the picture. So later today, I know Alex from MyCoin will be on another panel, but exchanges like MyCoin act as a bank, but instead of going through many different steps to transfer money from A to B, different cryptocurrencies, some of them allow for money to be transferred in a more efficient process, right? So if today I wanted to send money to my parents in Taiwan, I might have to take US dollars, then I might have to go to a bank and figure out how to wire transfer over, have to figure out if that bank is compatible with a bank in Taiwan. I probably need to pay significant transaction fees. And then my parents in Taiwan may have to wait till the bank opens to be able to receive that money. In contrast, when we think about cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Litecoin, many others out there, all you need is really a Bitcoin wallet address. You will have a private key associated with that transaction. That transaction is broadcasted to a network, and let's just say I'm sending it to Taiwan. I use an exchange, which is the equivalent of a bank like MyCoin, to be able to send it to my parents. And all they have to do is be able to receive it from the other side. So they have an account, they have an address, and I can send it directly. And if they want to withdraw whatever currency I send to them, it could be Bitcoin, they can withdraw it and then exchange it to Taiwan dollars. So you can imagine all the steps in between being reduced. So I wanted to cover that because this is the way that most people think about crypto is around the cryptocurrency layer. However, what we're doing at Filecoin is a little bit different. And this is a little bit of what Alon was mentioning, where we really start with cryptography. Cryptography is really just a secure way of communication between two parties. Most systems use what's called peer-to-peer networks to do so. And we are actually, I don't know why that's not showing up. We are a lot closer to other projects like Ethereum in that we think of ourselves as programmable money. And so imagine instead of just exchanging a currency, the currency is actually used to be able to build an application. So the currency layer is just an incentive mechanism to allow two parties to act. So in case of a smart contract, you need to be able to use that currency to be able to execute a contract from happening. So you may have heard of smart contracts, and that's one example of it. In Filecoin, we are trying to think about this, but in the instance of a storage network. And so Filecoin is a crypto-powered storage network. And our goal is to create a decentralized, efficient foundation for humanity's most important information. Many of you guys might be using centralized storage networks like Amazon Web Services, at Microsoft Azure. As you know, most of these large monopolies own most of the world's data. However, if you remember just around a year ago, last October, Facebook had a huge outage in which Facebook went down for nearly half a day. Employees weren't even able to use Facebook for basic transactions. And that's what happens when you have a single point of failure, right? You have one single network that if it goes down, everything goes down with it. With Filecoin, the way that we work is we have different storage providers all around the world running their own data centers, upkeeping the network with us. And so instead of the network being centralized, we are powered by a decentralized community of storage providers that help make it possible for us to not only offer data storage, but offer it at a much cheaper cost. And we are trying to close the chasm that exists between Web 2 and Web 3. You can see that in Web 2, you can read, write, it's interactive. And in Web 3, you can read, write, trust, but where we really come in with use of blockchain and cryptography is making sure that we can verify and have that additional layer of trust that two transactions after are very secure and don't have necessarily a single point of failure. So as you can see in this chart here, Filecoin, if you think about our storage and retrieval layer, is considered a layer 0, but right now we're building Filecoin virtual machine that offers our ability to do data storage on smart contracts, and strong L1s need to withstand bull and bear cycles. So you can see here, this is the example of Bitcoin through 4 bear cycles since 2013. You can see here it's gone up and down. Most people only think about cryptocurrency when there's a bull run, when the price goes up, but you can see there's been several dips in the past, in fact, 4 in total. And our community as a whole has now been through 4 bear cycles. The founder of the Filecoin white paper, Juan Benet, who runs the separate sibling company to us, Protocol Labs, started working on the Interplanetary File System, IPFS, back in 2013. And he went through Y Combinator and was able to found Protocol Labs in 2015. And in 2019, IPFS, LIP P2P became mainstream, and Filecoin was developed and tested. In 2020, we had our Filecoin mainnet launch. And today, here's where we are in our 4th bear cycle. And you can see here, our community has been through 4 versions of this. And so I wanted to share the rest of this presentation on what we've built and what we've learned from it. So bear markets are actually where sustainable ecosystems are built. I often joke when people are asking, how are you doing? How's the market doing? I usually say it's great because tourist season is over. There's a lot of startup founders that tend to latch on to buzzwords that happen in the startup cycle. This often happens in a bull market where there's a lot of capital flowing around and people just have crazy ideas. Whether those ideas are actually world-changing ideas that bring value to society, that might be questionable. But in bear markets, that's really when the product market fit of startups are tested. And so I'm going to just really quickly cover IPFS, LIP P2P, and Filecoin, which really make up our community. So IPFS makes the web work peer-to-peer. It is the data and content platform of Web3. You can see all the different companies that are using IPFS today. It allows for content addressing with CIDs. During the last bear market, we had close to 4 or 5 other competitors that were building similar protocols as IPFS. It is open source and free to use, but we became the default peer-to-peer protocol in Web3. We actually also significantly grew our network dramatically. And so most people think of bear markets as hibernation, as sleepy periods. Actually, I think it's the opposite. It's a time where people wanting to grow and do significant work, they have the opportunity to do so. We also started our first integration into the browser, so integrating with Brave and Opera. And we've also added hundreds of apps and tools and projects with newcomers like AnyType, Microsoft ION, 3box, and ETHDNS. We've also strengthened our community of builders and developers. We've hosted events like the first IPFS camp, which really brought our network of people wanting to work and build and make IPFS great, coming together for the first time. Next is LIP P2P, and as the name suggests, LIP P2P, the LIP part stands for library peer-to-peer, and it's a modular network stack for peer-to-peer protocols. And so you can imagine LIP P2P really allows for peer-to-peer transactions and setting up that network to do so. And so during the last bear market, as we worked on P2P, it became de facto networking layer for most Web3 projects. And in fact, we adopted a networking layer for Ethereum 2.0 and also 24 major Web3 projects like Polkadot, 0x, Flow. We also released 5 new language implementations, all led by community teams. And for those not as familiar in blockchain, the more resilient it is, it's when you can actually write a protocol in different languages. So like C++, Rust, different languages will make sure the network is much more resilient. We've also improved content routing from 8 to 1.5 seconds. We also grew the community significantly with tons of presence at different conferences. And finally, last but not least, in 2020, we had the mainnet launch for Filecoin to launch a crypto-powered storage network. As I described earlier, Filecoin offers the incentive layer for people to do a decentralized storage network. Today, there are over 4,000 storage providers all around the world, all incentivized through transacting with Filecoin to upkeep this network. And the mission of Filecoin is to create a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's most important information. So during the last bear market, and this started, imagine 2019, 2020, the community developed and launched the first Filecoin implementation. We actually developed the core building blocks of Filecoin, Filecoin proofs, DRAND, Filecoin's crypto economics, our security programs, and also the Filecoin improvement proposal governance process to make sure that our community feels like they can participate. We also had one of the most successful testnets in Web3, involving over 400 storage providers from 6 continents, and we uploaded over 230 petabytes of available storage. So we really grew the capacity of our network to store data. We also launched the first Filecoin Builders program, which included hackathons, accelerators, dev grants. We also launched the Filecoin Foundation, which I co-run. So one lesson learned is in bear markets, our communities are known to build, grow, and drive adoption. And the most resilient ecosystems, how you can tell something is not just a house of cards, is really also seeing how much communities are building, especially in a bear market. Filecoin is one of the most developed repositories on GitHub. I think it's in the top 4 or 5 for most crypto projects. And so you really want to make sure that you're bringing the community along. And in 2022, this is no different. The Filecoin community has not only just gotten started, but doubled down. And so since the beginning of 2022, in this current bear market, Filecoin adoption has accelerated dramatically. We've actually onboarded year-to-date data that has grown by 7.5 times, and we're growing at 20% a month. We've also expanded dramatically in our data centers all around the world, especially North America, Singapore, Korea, Hong Kong. We've also been investing deeply in all of our builders, where we've funded startups in our ecosystem, increased that by 1.6x, while also onboarded over 7,000 developers, which has included encouraging developers through hackathons, through different competitions, etc. We've also really doubled down on our network capacity. So we're actively launching the Filecoin virtual machine, which, like I said earlier, brings smart contract capability to the blockchain with our storage network. And it also offers things like compute over data and hierarchical consensus. We've also expanded our community and not only encourage our community to get together, but also grew our community events with an ambassador program that has over 70 events globally. And that's only growing month by month. So I'm going to quickly cover our storage client growth in 2022. Like I said, the amount of data we've onboarded has 7.5x. We've seen 20% of growth each month. And today we have over 19 exabytes of available storage on our network. To give you a perspective, this is around 1% of the entire cloud storage market globally that we've been able to achieve in the last 2 years, which is so quick if you imagine how slow the speed is for most enterprise companies. Storage on the Filecoin network right now is also around 1/100th the cost of Amazon Web Services. So we're really trying to make sure that we can keep any kind of data storage today accessible and affordable to the growing demand for data in our economy, which is estimated to be around 200 zettabytes by 2025. And so we want to make sure that we can make everyone that is dependent on data as the most important currency, we can make sure that we can keep that affordable through a decentralized network of people upkeeping it. Daily committed deals have reached 2 petabytes a day. And so we've seen volume from individual clients as well as our growth initiatives putting data on our network. You can see here, this is just a couple of different transparent databases we have. If you wanted to see how our current market deals are operating, how much storage we're showing, it's all transparent and very easy to find. The links are below. We've also helped launch products to help with different kinds of data onboarding. We have a product called Web3 storage and also NFT storage that are 80,000 users strong and has 140 million uploads since April 2021. And so, for example, if you don't already know, if you own an NFT, you're likely already using IPFS and Filecoin on the back end. We're working with OpenSea and every major NFT platform out there to make sure that the storage layer of NFTs can actually be secure. And then we also have allowed for Filecoin proof data that's stored on Filecoin in products like Web3 storage. We also have products like Estuary, which is a reliable way to upload public data onto Filecoin and pin it to IPFS. And that is across 1.1 petabytes of data onboarded from leading clients. One of the most exciting parts, for me at least, is our ability to also upload large-scale scientific data sets. So we have over 100 terabytes of genomic research data right now on the Filecoin network. We've just also onboarded groups like CERN through one of our storage providers, SEAL, which is really, really exciting. We're also working with universities like UC Berkeley to be able to put physics data onto the network. And so if you imagine just how much computational power a lot of these research centers allow, we really want to make sure that that data can be stored permanently and also become affordable. We've also uploaded public data sets from cities like New York City. Earlier last year, we put on New York City's open data on Filecoin. And this year, we're working to onboard even more cities to understand why permanent data, especially when it comes to public record, is so important to upkeep. Next, I wanted to really cover storage provider growth. And so as I explained earlier, Filecoin is upkept by storage providers all around the world. Think of them as almost Airbnb-like hosts. They're hosting, instead of people, they're hosting data. And they're running their own small business and they're making money with it. And so we've had a lot of storage providers growing in Q2 and Q3, especially in North America, which has grown by 89%, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Korea. I would love to see Taiwan on the map. I know we have a few storage providers there, but I would love to see the numbers grow for Taiwan. And you can see the number of storage providers taking deals has also 4x in 2022. We've also reached 75% of verified data. So one of the things that we're trying to do is also make sure that the data we're uploading isn't just junk data, that it's verifiable. And so we have several programs like Filecoin Plus that allow for that. We also helped set the standard this past year for renewable energy data. So we are considered the world's most transparent major blockchain for electricity use. We have a verifiable energy dashboard that shows just how much energy our network is using at any point in time. And we also have provided more than 1.8 terawatts of renewable energy, which is enough to power over 160,000 houses for a year. Our Filecoin Green program also helps our storage provider network prove their sustainable operations. And so everyone that is participating in our network, they're showing immediately at the point of energy use just how much they're using, which is a lot different from traditionally how most companies today report their environmental data, which is very much backwards. They do it after the fact, and sometimes that data can be muddled. Next, I wanted to quickly just jump in on our developers and our builders in 2022. Like I said earlier, we've onboarded over 7,000 builders just in this current bear market. over 2,800 project submissions, and onboarded over 30,000 people in hackathons alone. We have tons of hackathons, including presence at Taipei Blockchain Week. So if you guys are around in December, I will be there, and a few others from our ecosystem. So very, very excited to see the number of developers in our network continue to grow. If you're interested in getting involved in our hackathons, I just wanted to provide the site here. The foundation has also provided over 12 million in developer grants that are in approval for this year. And so we have a couple of programs that allow us to be able to onboard new developers into our ecosystem, and we'll fund them. This can be in smaller grants. We have sponsored open grants. We also have different requests for proposals. And so people have thrown in ideas to make Filecoin even better. People have responded to our existing requests for proposals, and people have also submitted different ideas for open grants. And that has graduated a ton of incredible small projects all the way to companies that have raised outside capital. So that's an area that we're especially proud of. In fact, 50% of our grantees in our developer grants all come from small hackathon programs that we funded. We also onboarded over 175 new startups in the Filecoin and IPFS ecosystem through our accelerator programs. So we've had 176 teams graduate through programs like our partnership with accelerators like Techstars, which is a major accelerator in the US. We've also partnered with Longhash and a few others in the Asia region. We've had 21 cohorts that are launched, and we also have helped our set of startups raise over 100 million. And you can also see here just the different funded teams in the Filecoin and IPFS ecosystem and what stage they're at. So you can see those that are at the developer grant stage, those that have gone all the way up to a Series D, Series C, all of that. We also are trying to actively support top Web3 projects. As I started, we are really not only the storage layer for Web2, but also working to be the storage layer for Web3, and everything runs on storage, as you're aware. So we've announced strategic partnerships to build data secure music NFT ecosystems in the metaverse. You can see a couple of companies here that might be familiar. We're also coming to game engines. So if you're passionate as a gamer, we definitely have integrated and partnered with Unity and groups like Unreal Engine. We also, like I mentioned earlier, are trying to support browser integration. And so we've enabled 56 million users to use Filecoin natively in browsers like Brave. And then just looking ahead, we are also building new network capacities from an infrastructure standpoint for 2022 and into 2023. If you're curious, this might be a little bit too technical, but here are our core improvement roadmaps this year. One of the things that I'm most excited about is, again, Filecoin Virtual Machine, which allows smart contracts and programmability to happen. So if you think about today, the ability for Web3 storage to be as efficient as Web2. So think about running a Twitter or a Twitch on Web3. Today, that is really hard to do. And with breakthroughs like Filecoin Virtual Machine, and also being able to integrate with the DeFi economy, we will allow for perpetual storage and auto-renewing deals, and also a ton of new use cases for how we can integrate programmable money into a lot of the smart contract layers that are happening in the rest of decentralized finance. So you can see here, there's actually a hackathon that we're launching for Filecoin Virtual Machine happening this month, November 17th onward. And so this is an area that you're interested in, definitely check it out. What I was mentioning earlier over how do we actually allow for the computation side to actually match what is happening in Web2. It really includes programs like compute over data. We have a whole team that is looking at blockchain computational models to make sure that we can be as efficient to be able to run processes just like Web2 companies are. And so this kind of work will allow for us to be able to really run huge programs like a Twitch or a Twitter onto the Web3 ecosystem. We are also looking at next-gen scalability through consensus breakthroughs. And so we have an entire team called the Consensus Lab that is trying to break through the bottleneck and allow for blockchain transactions to happen a lot faster than they are. And so right now, you can see we were looking to work on upgrading chain scalability through hierarchical consensus. That right now is happening at hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, but we're trying to really break through to the billions, and our research in this space will allow us to do that. We are also working, this last year on hardware deployment, and moving ahead, we're really looking at the software enablement layer. So that includes everything I just reviewed, from Filecoin virtual machine to compute over data to next-gen scalability. And then finally, we're trying to grow our community. I mentioned earlier, we've hosted major global events this past year, 44 events to date across 17 cities. We launched this Filecoin Orbit program just earlier this year, and this is all a community of volunteers that want to host an event and really help build up the Filecoin ecosystem. And it's been incredible just to watch this community grow. We've also had major ecosystem events, including recently Filecoin Singapore that took place in September in Singapore, as well as Filecoin Lisbon that just took place a week and a half ago. And these kind of events really bring the community together in different regions. And so I wanted to close by offering some advice to the growing community of Filecoin users, but also this broader community here that might be just passionate about blockchain in this bear market. The first is focus on adoption metrics, ignore the noise. As you can see here, adoption is everything. If you're so distracted by the market noise, you're gonna lose focus of what really matters long-term, which is making sure that you can adopt and build, and in our case, build the largest decentralized storage network in the world. We also wanna be prioritizing getting very good at fundraising. For those that may not be aware, the VC capital in a bull market allows for a lot of capital flow in bear markets. And so the VC industry has around $290 billion of what's called dry powder to really reinvest in startups. And that's an area that we're focused on, making sure that the startups that are building on our ecosystem, they can really leverage. During Filecoin Singapore, we had a Filecoin VC demo day where we brought together over 300 investors to really support our startups in our ecosystem. And so this is an area that you might be interested in. Definitely let me know. We are always looking to invest and also help support different kind of startups thinking about distributed storage. Bear markets are also the best time for builders to cross the chasm. What do I mean there? Well, actually, Sequoia did a survey in which their top 20 companies all came to light during the last bear market. And so you can see here, all of these companies on the left were founded during the 2008 Great Recession. So for those that think startups can only thrive in a bull market, they're definitely wrong. We've seen the best companies be the ones that are building and thriving in bear markets in the past. And then finally, bet on the Filecoin community scale and resilience. And so that's one thing that we have been investing heavily on, is making sure that we are supporting our community. Everything from data onboarding to our support for storage providers to builders to deploying capital where we need to. Like I mentioned before, we're trying to be the scalable data storage layer of Web3. Right now, I would argue we are the leaders in this space, and we want to make not only the scalable storage layer of Web3, but the scalable data storage layer of the entire web. So we really want to also cross the chasm for Web2 cloud storage as well. For those that might have been affected by some of the news this week, like Twitter, or what has happened at Meta, which recently went through, I think, 11,000 layoffs. We have over 463 jobs that are open right now across 100 companies that we've supported in our network, including ones on my team. And so if you're interested, I've just shared a link below. Feel free to take a look. But I wanted to open up the floor to questions. I think I'm over time, so.
No, Clara, you're perfect. Well, thank you so much for your presentation and the valuable advice. Really amazing to see what you and the Filecoin team has initiated and achieved in the past years. Just like you mentioned, I think keep building and growing the bear market is a testament to the community's resilience. So congrats to you and the Filecoin team. Really appreciate your sharing. We do have a few questions from the audience. This question is from Kevin. So he really appreciates your presentation, and he is wondering, so Filecoin is like designed for decentralized storage. He's wondering, does Filecoin also support cloud computation and other data processing capabilities? And also, his follow-up question is, do you think it has potential to replace commercial cloud services like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud?
Absolutely. And so I think around the data processing capability one, I would say we're definitely working on it. I think as I showed at the end, we're working on things like computer data just to make sure that our network can be really great at data processing and other capabilities. We absolutely are behind in terms of specific things that something like AWS would have to offer. So today, if you wanted to build the next Twitter, I would argue use AWS, right? But we definitely are the solution when it comes to large data sets and more permanent storage. So we are, like I said, 1/100th the cost compared to AWS when it comes to equivalent products like Amazon Glacier. And so if you have large amounts of data that you need to store, or if, let's just say you're an AI startup and you have all this machine learning or training data that you have to keep somewhere, these data costs add up. And I would argue that we are already incredibly competitive, if not even better than most of the current Web2 cloud providers. But we're definitely working to make sure that we can have a lot more computational powers that allow us to be the best solution for other capabilities.
Great. I hope that answers Dr. Kevin's question. Another question from audience, Astron. I'm pretty sure I got the name wrong, but Astron is curious about, like, is Filecoin based on distributed storage architecture or still centralized storage architecture? And what's the efficiency concern you might have regarding data transfer?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the beginning, when we think about what cryptography means, it really just means secure communication. And so we allow for not only just one centralized data center. If you think about a simple way to look at it is Amazon might have data centers in Oregon, right? And there might be tons of data centers that all belong to Amazon there. Now, today, if I'm a dictator of a horrible country and I wanted to shut down the internet, I would go to Amazon and say, Amazon, I need you to just shut down all the data from your servers coming into country X, right? And that's all possible when you have a centralized data storage center. In our case, we have over 4,000 storage providers all around the world upkeeping their own data center. And so there isn't necessarily that centralized control. And that allows us to have a really resilient internet. And for us, one of our biggest missions, like I mentioned, is to make sure that we can maintain integrity of information that everyone should access, even from a human rights standpoint. So years ago, when the Turkish government decided to take down Wikipedia, we had a backup copy of Wikipedia stored on IPFS, the interplanetary file system, so that people could access different versions of information. And today, the internet is very much the fabric of the world's largest library. It used to be, information used to be centralized in religion, in churches. Gutenberg printing press came about and democratized knowledge. But today's internet, when we think about finding knowledge on it, is not equal. People pay the most in advertising dollars to have their information served up. And so with a decentralized storage network and a decentralized internet, which a number of companies are building towards and what people are calling Web3, we're trying to allow for this kind of peer-to-peer network, allow for even better internet where people can actually access things that they're looking for without intermediaries in place that might bias information.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Clara, for joining us today and your awesome presentation and energy. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Clara.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Cool. And again, like keep it up, all the great questions. We're a little bit behind the time, so that's why we couldn't ask all the questions, but we'll try to see if Clara will be available to address those questions which haven't been answered. But please join me to welcome our third speaker today, Troy Cross. Troy is the fellow at Bitcoin Policy Institute. He's also a professor of philosophy and humanities at Reed College. Very cool background, Troy. And because Troy has been interested in Bitcoin for a long time and even began mining himself back in 2011, he's able to form unique and thoughtful perspectives on the relationship between Bitcoin and energy in particular. And Troy has become an important voice in the industry to help us think about Bitcoin technology in a different way. So today, Troy is going to talk about the evolution of Bitcoin mining and share with us the 3 trends that he sees. So please make sure you submit your questions, and I believe Troy will be happy to have a more interactive session with us. Troy, you're online. I see you. Hi, take it away.
Hi, and thank you for having me. Let's see, I'm just sharing my screen here. Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. My background is unusual. I'm not an industry person. I don't represent a company. There is no Bitcoin company. Bitcoin is just a decentralized protocol, a free and open source protocol. There is no Bitcoin CEO, we like to say. And it's left to actually people like me who are just Bitcoin enthusiasts and thinkers to take up the cause of sort of formulating not only sort of what a company would do in terms of PR, but also deeply thinking through strategy. Yeah, this is who I am. I'd like to talk about what I think is the most misunderstood aspect of Bitcoin. I'm an epistemologist, actually. Epistemology is the theory of knowledge. And I think there's a public discourse, a public set of known truths about Bitcoin that are vastly divergent from reality, from the way things are. And of course, this happens all the time. Human beings get things wrong. But this is a wider gap between the truth and the dominant narrative, than I've ever seen in a lasting and really impactful way. So what I'd like to do is kind of unpack what I'm going to call the great mistake about the relation between Bitcoin energy and emissions, explain why it came about, and try to pass along my own view of what the reality is and how it will differ in the future from the past. So I'm sure, if you're in this audience, have heard that Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment. Not just bad for the environment, but extremely bad for the environment. Bad for the environment in ways that other industries are not. You've probably not heard that clothes dryers are bad for the environment, or Christmas lights are bad for the environment. But this is what you've heard about Bitcoin. You've probably also heard that Bitcoin mining stresses the grid, as already has been mentioned today, whatever time it is for you. We're in an energy crisis in many parts of the world. Energy has become expensive, and the price of energy as an input to industry is really meaningful. And Bitcoin is an energy intensive industry. And so you may have heard mining stresses the grid, driving up the price of energy. Okay, I think both of these are highly misleading. Here's a headline from the World Economic Forum in December 15th, 2017, as you can see. In 2020, Bitcoin will consume more power than the world does today. This was also a headline in Newsweek magazine. Now, 2020 has come and gone. Bitcoin actually does not use more power than the world did in December 15th, 2017. In fact, it uses 0.15% of primary energy and is responsible for 0.1% of CO2 emissions. These numbers are not precise. This is the best estimate of many estimates we have from the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance. I think it's probably still high, but just compare 0.15% now versus the prediction 100% over 2 years ago, where Bitcoin was actually using far less energy at that time. This is a prediction that was off by 1,000-fold. Of course, no apology or correction was ever issued by Newsweek or by the World Economic Forum. Instead, the narrative was simply strengthened by doubling down. Maybe you've heard of this paper, most famous paper on Bitcoin emissions in a very prestigious journal, Nature Climate Change, called Bitcoin Emissions Alone Could Push Global Temperatures, Global Warming above 2 degrees Celsius, apart from all other human activity. This publication, based on a really simplistic model, which would not have survived even a Reddit thread or a Twitter thread, or even any simple discussion with anyone who knew anything about Bitcoin mining, made it into one of the most prestigious journals. And it was the sole academic citation on the relation between Bitcoin and climate in a letter written by 70 different environmental organizations to Congress, to the US Congress, which led to a series of hearings. It then appeared in other letters from the senators, Elizabeth Warren and so on, and from Congress people raising money. This is what led to an executive order by the Biden administration to investigate the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining. As you can see, towards the bottom of this page, there are 3 links. This is from the Nature Climate Change website to matters arising. Those matters arising are each 3 refutations of this model back in 2019 in the same journal. This is published in October 2018. The article was thoroughly debunked by other academics very quickly. Even those academics didn't necessarily know much about Bitcoin. But the article was debunked, but the myth that Bitcoin alone is going to send us into a nightmare scenario of warming persisted and still persists. In the recent Office of Science and Technology Policy report on Bitcoin mining and the energy system and emissions, they cite this article. They don't cite it as an authority, but it appears there as a citation. Okay, one last piece of this sort of media. How Bitcoin mining devastated this New York town. I believe this is a Bloomberg story. A story about electricity rates being pressed up by Bitcoin mining, forcing everyone else to pay more for scarce electricity in this town in New York. Okay. I've said these media claims and these scientific studies were wrong. I mean, clearly you can see that the Newsweek story, the WEF story, is wrong. Bitcoin is not using 100% of the world's energy 2 years ago. How did it go wrong? We can't just say that it went wrong, but we must figure out why it went wrong. Okay, I'm going to try to answer that. First of all, I want to say just a bit about what Bitcoin is. What is it? What is it? Bitcoin is neutral money. Neutral, meaning it's not controlled by a central party. You may have heard that Russia's foreign exchange deposits, their deposits with US banks, were seized after the invasion of Ukraine. Some of that money was given to New York Firefighters Fund. But it illustrates that our money, as we know it today, is not neutral. It's controlled by centralized parties. And if you offend those centralized parties, your money might be seized. Right now, we've got a geopolitically dicey situation. Maybe we talk about this more in the panel that follows. You have Belt and Road countries using Chinese currency. You have American extended empire using the dollar. Dollars, how we trade oil, and it's global reserve currency. It's not neutral. It's politically aligned. Bitcoin, separates money from state. Okay. Just for clarity, Bitcoin is a commodity, that it is a digital good, a non-debasable digital monetary instrument. Non-debasable meaning there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. It has a fixed schedule of issuance that is set by its software. That it's very hard to grasp what a digital commodity is, but you're here at this talk, so you probably get that. It's also a network, a decentralized, censorship-resistant payment network, and that network can be used to transmit value, even if it's not denominated in Bitcoin. So you can send dollars on the Bitcoin network, for instance. Why would we want something like this? Why would this be valuable? Well, ask yourself this question. Why would something that transfers value from anyone to anyone and that cannot be debased, meaning you can't print more of it, why would that be valuable? And you'll answer your question. That didn't exist before Bitcoin. Now it does. There are various cases where it proves useful. I looked at the Taiwanese currency. It's pretty stable. The dollar is pretty stable. The people in this audience are lucky to have good money, but many people around the world do not have good money. Recently, Lebanon, annual inflation is over 150%. People looking for something to hold value that their government cannot debase. Same thing happens in Cuba. There are also cases where the banks don't allow certain people to access their services. In Afghanistan, some female-run businesses run by women, used Bitcoin because they didn't have access to the banking system. And that goes for many around the world, and in particular, political dissidents, journalists, anyone critical of a regime can be cut out of a banking system because, again, the money is not neutral. It's aligned with a political regime. So just ask yourself, why might neutral money be valuable in today's geopolitical climate? Okay, now what is Bitcoin mining? Bitcoin mining is not digging. Mining is maybe a misnomer. You're not extracting value out of the ground. We should call it hashing. Bitcoin is a distributed ledger. That's what it is. It's a ledger. Everyone has a copy of every transaction in the history of Bitcoin who runs a Bitcoin node, which is very computationally lightweight. All of these ledgers are coordinated to agree, and they're coordinated through a consensus mechanism called proof of work. Here's what proof of work is. This mining machines, now highly specialized ASIC machines, are spread around the world, and they are guessing. They are guessing from a certain kind of problem, and they're checking those guesses. They can check the guesses very quickly to see whether they're right or wrong. The winner of this guessing contest is verified to be the winner by the entire network, and the protocol gives that winning miner a reward. Right now, that's 6.25 Bitcoin plus the transaction fees. That happens about every 10 minutes. So the way that you coordinate all these ledgers is that everybody defers to the winner who finds a qualifying number, a number of a certain sort, which I won't go into. Okay. Why does it use so much energy? The energy use of Bitcoin's network is what it allows it to remain secure and neutral. It's what secures the ledger. If you wanted to attack the ledger, you would need 51% of the network's computing power. So the more energy spent by the Bitcoin network, the more secure it is. And part of Bitcoin's decentralization comes from the fact that cheap energy is distributed globally around the world. It's not concentrated in any one country or political district. All right. I'm going to skip this slide. Bitcoin mining is a unique electrical load. Okay, here's what's unusual about Bitcoin. It uses a lot of energy, but it has a very different effect on the grid from other forms of energy usage. It's time agnostic. You make the same amount of Bitcoin out of the same energy at any time of day. It's location agnostic. The rate of return on Bitcoin from a machine is the same anywhere in the world, whether it's in a city, whether it's out in the countryside, whether it's in the middle of the ocean. All you need is an internet connection and energy. It's also interruptible and attenuable. That means that at any point in time, you can turn off an ASIC, you can turn off a miner. And because the process is random, you aren't partway through a process. I said it takes 10 minutes on average for someone to win. But if you are 9 minutes into a search for a winner and nobody has found a winning number yet, the expected time for the winner is still 10 minutes, even though you're 9 minutes in. So it's a randomized process. So unlike any other kind of computing, where you start a process, even if it's AI rendering or whatever, and then you lose money if you cut off that process because you wasted the first part of the process, with ASIC, with Bitcoin mining, you lose nothing except the time that you're off. It's also portable. These machines are small, and it's scalable. Mining can happen profitably at a very small scale or at a very large scale. Now, I'm coming to my answer of why we got things wrong. It's because mining changes over time. This is I've heard you don't play ice hockey in Taiwan, but roller hockey. This is the greatest hockey player. Wayne Gretzky says a good hockey player plays where the puck is. A great hockey player plays where the puck is going to be. And I think what happened before is we looked at a brief moment in the history of Bitcoin. That Kimura paper was written following a very sharp run up in Bitcoin's price. Very sharp run up to $17,000 from $500. Looking at that steep increase in price, they predicted that Bitcoin's price would continue to increase at the same rate. They didn't think about how mining would change. And the same thing is happening now. Here's what's happened very recently in Bitcoin in the last couple of years. We had another run up in price. This price was something like $3,000 to $69,000 per Bitcoin. Then we had an ASIC shortage. You cannot make chips fast enough to meet the demand for them. We also had a ban of mining in China, where most of the hash rate was coming from. So suddenly we had very few miners in the system. The block reward remains exactly the same, 6.25 every 10 minutes. But we had very few ASICs chasing that Bitcoin. We also didn't have a lot of places to plug miners in. What happened in that scenario was that it was profitable for anyone to run any miner on any power. So if you had an ASIC, you were just looking for places to plug in. It didn't matter the cost of your power. The result is that coal and gas plants were kept open in this period, and the price of electricity was increased in some local markets. That's where the story on New York came from. What has happened since then? All of these things have reversed. The hash rate has increased sharply, even as the price has decreased. Price of Bitcoin has decreased. And the price of electricity, of course, is higher because of energy crisis. This has led to mining profits being extremely low and many bankruptcies and consolidations within the industry. What happens next? Bitcoin enters a new phase. It becomes a dung beetle. It eats the waste and refuse from the rest of our energy system. Here's why. With profits extremely low, the cost of electricity is the by far dominant input to the business of mining. Only the cheapest power can survive. And in my estimation, only free power will survive in the mining business. Your power needs to be free. And I say free power and you say, what? Yes, there is free power. There is negatively priced power. Here's proof in Sean Connell's slide. This is prices in West Texas. In areas where we have solar and wind build out, we will always have wasted power because the production of power cannot be adjusted to meet the load. So we will always have windy days where we have more wind than power we need. We'll always have sunny afternoons when we have too much solar on the grid. That is negatively priced power. And when power is your most important input, you will mine on that rather than on other forms of power. This allows Bitcoin miners flexibility, means they can turn on when we have excess power and they can shut off when we need power. That means we can make solar and wind profitable in ways they weren't, because miners will be paying a marginal amount for power that would otherwise have to be thrown away. Negatively priced power. This is the uptime for one of the largest miners in the world. I just presented on a panel with this guy. I'm presenting at a conference I just presented yesterday. I'm still in California at a conference for Bitcoin. and I sat on stage next to this guy. Look at the amount of uptime they have. They're turning their machines off this is in Texas in the ERCOT system, almost half the time. We can show that if you have a flexible data center that gets to 85% or less uptime, that is net decarbonizing for the ERCOT grid. Energy experts have written papers to that effect by running models. So flexibility in a data center actually decarbonizes the grid because it provides payment for power. Another trend is methane mitigation. CH4 is methane. It's 84 times as warming as CO2 over a 20-year period. It's 25 times as warming as CO2 over a 100-year period. It is produced in oil fields as a byproduct, from landfills, from agriculture, from wastewater treatments. Some of it is simply vented into the atmosphere. Some of it is flared, meaning it's burned at an inefficient rate. You can see here, this is flared methane. Burning, but very inefficiently. Maybe on average, 91% efficiency worldwide for flaring. Bitcoin is uniquely suited to mitigate this methane, which the UN calls our strongest lever against climate change. It's responsible for up to 1/3 of all warming. Bitcoin mining is scalable, it's not harmful, it's profitable, it's interruptible, it's location agnostic, and it's tested. None of the other candidates for handling this are. Methane mining is taking off in Bitcoin. And this is Daniel Batten's chart. I do not endorse it as scientific, but it's a rough back of the envelope calculation showing that if we reduce CH4 methane with Bitcoin mining, we can reach carbon neutrality and in fact, carbon negativity. And maybe even in the next few years, given the rate of increase at how much mining this is happening on landfills, in agriculture, on wastewater treatment facilities, et cetera. Next trend is waste heat. Okay, when your mining operation is not profitable, you need to maximize your profits in every way you can. All the energy that goes into a mining machine is not destroyed. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change forms. All of it, 100% of it, is transformed into heat. That heat can be sold. It's low-grade heat, but here's a distillery, for instance, where someone is mining with hydroelectric power, renewable power, and they're using the heat. This company uses it for district heating. They also use it to distill whiskey. But heat is being used in many, many other creative ways. There's greenhouses in Northern Europe where they're growing food, tomatoes, cucumbers, flowers, with the heat byproduct of waste miners. Now, if you were already using electric heat, essentially, the mining is not making any impact at all on the grid. If you were replacing fossil fuel heating, it could actually be decarbonizing, right? And if you don't use your waste heat, you will struggle to be competitive with those who do. Okay, here's how all this happens. Bitcoin mining is the closest thing we've ever seen to what economists call a perfect market. It's perfect competition. Perfect competition by its very nature leads to low margins in the business. That leads to electrical price sensitivity. That's the biggest input. That leads to using wasted energy. Low margins also lead to selling heat. Using wasted energy and selling heat means you're balancing the grid for renewables, you're mitigating methane, and you're electrifying the heating. Okay, finally, waste energy. When you use waste energy, that means non-rival consumption. That means you are not using energy that others need. So you won't push up electrical rates. Instead, you'll be buying unbought energy, which actually lowers electrical rates for ordinary ratepayers and accelerates the transition to renewables, because the International Energy Agency identifies basically the lack of financing these new operations as the #1 obstacle to the decarbonization effort. So the great correction to the great mistake is Bitcoin mining is actually good for the environment. Bitcoin mining actually greens and strengthens the electrical grid. Yes, it uses energy, but energy use does not mean emissions. Energy use does not mean carbon. There are forms of energy use, such as mitigating methane, such as using wasted energy, such as financing renewable build-out and balancing the grid and replacing fossil heating that actually decarbonize. Thanks very much. I'm anxious to hear your questions. I don't know how much time I used or how much time I have, but thank you.
Thank you, Troy. It was a really thought-provoking presentation. Thanks for taking us look at Bitcoin mining from a very different angle than we used to have. And I learned a lot. I believe the audience did too. My first question for you is curious to hear your thoughts like what's the US federal state government's latest position on the entire Bitcoin mining thing, and also
Well, okay.
And also, yeah, my second question will be like, since we have a large audience in Taiwan, which part do you think Taiwan can really help or take part in whatever the US is thinking?
Yeah, well, first of all, the US does not have any kind of unified take on Bitcoin mining. The president directed a team, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, to study this question. And I consulted with the team actually, and I'm in contact with them. And their report is very skeptical. They're not quite on board with me. But there are many politicians who are. So it's split. The United States, there's 50 states, and many of those states are very Bitcoin friendly, and some of them are Bitcoin hostile. But what's wonderful about where we are in this process is that even though the Biden administration is skeptical of claims like mine, they are in dialogue with the industry. That report began a dialogue. What we really need are studies. And the problem with this is that what we're studying is the past, but the future is very different. We have 30 different mining companies who are looking into mining methane. We have all of these major solar companies that are looking to co-locate Bitcoin mining with their solar. But there isn't a huge track record of that happening over a long period of time. So knowledge is going to lag, but the government is talking to industry. So I'm optimistic, although I think there will be some blowback. You know, the US is very divided politically, and there's a danger that this becomes a politicized issue. In terms of what can Taiwan do? Well, give us chips for one. Okay, it's very simple. Everything that I described requires that there be a competitive market in chips. If there's a chip shortage, then a miner's inputs is not primarily energy, it's chips, because the chips are basically futures contracts on Bitcoin. What you have when you have an ASIC is a money printer. You're printing Bitcoin. So the value of an ASIC is entirely related to, not to the cost of production, but the predicted price of Bitcoin in the future. So when Bitcoin shoots up really high, ASICs become very expensive. S19s go to $15,000, $20,000. Okay, then you have to run the machine all day in order to pay back the machine. So you can't sit behind a wind farm and run it for 5 hours a day because you won't be able to pay back your machine. But when ASICs are cheap and there's competition in the ASIC market, that's when we get dung beetle behavior. And the ASICs go in and suck up all of the wasted energy in the system because they don't have to be on all the time. So supply of chips is crucial for the good behavior of Bitcoin mining. And the good behavior of Bitcoin mining is crucial for the reputation of Bitcoin as a pro-social contributor to human flourishing and the energy transition. And that is crucial to Bitcoin's price. So there's a whole virtuous circle that begins in Taiwan. It begins with the allocation of fabrication time, and that it ends with a high price of Bitcoin and the pro-social behavior of Bitcoin.
Great. Well, thank you so much for letting us know that Taiwan can play a role in that positive cycle. Really appreciate that sharing. I hope, Dr. Kevin, you feel like Troy covered your question around Taiwan's role and the industry's implications for our technology industry. So the next question is, so we understood that Bitcoin hashing has like migrated more than 50% of total hashing power outside China, basically to the US and Europe ever since like summer in 2021, largely because China's ban on crypto. So first, what have you observed as the fundamental difference between the new US corporate miners versus the prior miners in China? And secondly, sorry to give you two questions at once, but the second question is, what's your opinion about the recent rebirth of Bitcoin hashing in China, even though their government obviously bans it? So curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, first of all, why did miners come to the US? And they went to other places too, like Kazakhstan, but a lot of them came to the US. They came to the US for different reasons. One is rule of law. Miners just get seized in other governments. In Venezuela, the government just came in and seized miners. They have a terrible currency in Venezuela, but also their citizens had money printers, so they took them and printed the money for themselves, right? So the US, they feared theft less. The US has power infrastructure, and this is ironic because the US used to be a manufacturing center. Then our manufacturing went to places like Taiwan and China. Well, when the manufacturing left, they left behind power infrastructure. So in upstate New York, in the Midwest, where we used to have industrial facilities, we still had like warehouses that had transformers and substations. So we had power infrastructure ready for those miners to plug in. And then also the US has, and this is key, deep capital markets. So what happened? What did the miners do? They borrowed. They borrowed so much money. Because we had a Bitcoin boom. The US government printed lots of money. So the system was full of money for speculation. The same speculation that drove the stock market bubble, the real estate bubble, was lent to miners. What did miners do with it? They bought ASICs from China and Taiwan and then plugged them into that infrastructure. Of course, they got out over their skis. They went too far in debt. Chinese miners were better behaved. They were smarter. They were not as much in debt. The American miners, we've seen Core Scientific go under, Compute North go under, and we expect many more, especially given the recent drop in price. We're going to see more bankruptcies. That's a result of debt, turnover. And then to your second question, why the resurgence in China? Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance identifies 20% of the hash rate in China now, 20% after it was banned. This shows me, really, I said that Bitcoin is neutral money. The reason it's neutral is because it's small scale, peer-to-peer, hard to stop. You know how many local officials just need bribing, or how hard it is to hide like an ASIC in the basement. It's like a marijuana in the US or something, an activity that an individual can do at a very small scale. So it shows you actually the resilience of the network. You can't stop it because individuals can do it at a very small scale worldwide, like file sharing, right? Like the internet itself.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Troy. We also got a lot of appreciation from the audience in the chat window for your presentation. I know you're staying with us for the panel discussion, so I believe we'll keep learning more from you. So thank you so much, Troy.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So amazing. And thank you so much for staying with us till the last part of our event today, which is our panel discussion. So let me introduce our panel moderator, James Lee. James is a senior advisor at the Taiwan External Trade Development Council, known as TAITRA. So prior to TAITRA, James had many years of experience in investment and has accumulated deep points of view in macroeconomic trends. He's also a contributing author to many leading media in Taiwan, where he talks about crypto and also geopolitics. So let's welcome James and have him introduce our panelists and also the topic of their discussion. Welcome, James.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Peggy. So do we have Alex on as well? Yes, excellent. I am super honored and thrilled to be moderating this panel today. Troy is a fellow of the Bitcoin Policy Institute, an institute that, to me, I've seen some of the most cutting edge thinkings and analysis on the space that has come from Bitcoin Policy Institute. So I'm very, very happy, very thrilled, very honored. Alex is the founder and CEO of MyCoin, one of the oldest and the largest crypto exchange in Taiwan. And actually, I'm personally a user for a very long time. And my coin is a go-to place that I recommend my friends to transact crypto as well as Bitcoin. So before we begin, I would also let Alex as well as Troy to introduce a little bit about themselves or the companies or organizations they work for before we jump into the bull ring. Maybe Alex, you can start, and then followed by Troy, since Troy just came from the last session.
Sure, a real pleasure to be here, James, and thank you for that introduction. A quick bit about me. I'm a native of Taiwan, but I spent most of my life actually in California. Upon discovering Bitcoin in 2013, introduced by my good friend and classmate Bobby Lee, I was smitten. But at the same time, over the past decade or so, I have not been blind to, I suppose, its downsides or its shortcomings. So, excuse me, Troy, I really had to bite my tongue during your talk. I mean, I agree with you in the main, but to posit that Bitcoin is somehow good for the environment, I think is a bridge too far, at least for me. I would say by the same token that gold is definitely not good for the environment, but that is not going to stop gold from being mined and being worn as jewelry or being installed as teeth around the world. And that's fine. I don't think we need to prettify, what is otherwise a very human need. I guess, James, during this panel, I'm much more interested in exploring what I consider to be a range of options that has now emerged in the past decade since I've been involved with Bitcoin and blockchain. And a simple way to frame it is, instead of an on-off switch, instead of completely centralized as our central governments, our central banks are, and on the other hand, Bitcoin being, a physical entropy-based form of trust that is almost completely decentralized, I think we're presented now with a range of options in between. And since the title of this panel is really what it means for nation states, I think that's where there's a very rich, topic to be mined here. So with that, I'll leave it there. So as Jane mentioned, I've been in this business for about a decade now. We're the longest running, as well as the largest, and I would argue the most compliant, as well as technologically capable platform here in Taiwan. And why I chose to come back to Taiwan a decade ago, besides the fact that, like Clara, my parents are here, is because I think blockchain really is all about making sense of diametrically opposed concepts. How can you have trust yet in a completely decentralized way? Taiwan, I'll frame the contradiction in this way. This political entity that I am a part of here doing business in Taiwan, by its official constitution, which it dares not change by threat of war, lays claim to a huge swath of land about 100 miles to our west. Officially, that's what it says. Yet, this political entity depends on its existence depends on a country roughly 6,000 miles to our east. So if that's not a contradiction, I don't know what is. As such, this political entity, this piece of land, I think is particularly, high in potential for exploring the potential and the possibilities of blockchain, especially, as I argued earlier, a decade into this, we're now presented with a range of analog as opposed to purely digital options. So let me leave my introduction there and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Alex. Just from hearing what you talk, I almost want to throw out all the pre-written Q&A already and just dig deeper on what you said. Let's turn to Troy really quick to talk about your background, just in case some of the attendees didn't listen to your last session. And secondarily, if you want to comment on Alex's a reply to you regarding energy earlier.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. It's an honor to be on with you, and it's an honor to be on with Bobby Lee's classmate. And Alex. No, I'm very, very, very excited to have this conversation. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, I would like to say just a word about who I am. I'm a philosophy professor. I teach metaphysics and epistemology. It's not exactly related to Bitcoin, but I've been a Bitcoiner since 2011. I found this Bitcoin talk forums and the Bitcoin idea as exciting as anything in philosophy, and can't stop thinking about it. And particularly more recently thinking about Bitcoin and energy. I'm a fellow at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I advise a lot of companies in the space. Yeah, I do want to come back to Alex's point regarding my talk. The conclusion of my talk, I had on the slide, Bitcoin is good for the environment. Bitcoin is good for the grid. The is there is tricky. It's the is of what I think the essence of the technology is. But I don't think that is realized yet. So I would agree with you. When I saw the headlines of Bitcoin has kept a coal plant from opening in Kentucky, from closing, when Bitcoin has kept open a gas plant in New York, when Bitcoin, I've seen, Bitcoin mines in China, in Inner Mongolia, where there's a fire and people are harmed and electrical wires are strung up in all sorts of ways, and seen piles of e-waste following the ban. None of that was good for the environment. And there are also likewise cases where Bitcoin has been really disruptive to grids, where a miner, just like in those towns in New York, where a miner brings in lots of equipment, they create lots of noise pollution for the neighbors. They don't do acoustic treatment. They don't, there's a lot of bad behavior from individual actors, and especially following a price spike, and sometimes actually following a price crash. If you take a huge load on the grid and you remove it suddenly, that is also very bad for the grid. So grid operators can be hurt in either direction, actually. A lot of miners can behave badly, and mining historically has not been a good thing for the grid. This is why I think the future and the past are nothing alike. I just talked to CEO of one of the largest mining companies today, not the one I mentioned, before I went on stage. And he said, I think that we're going to be mining entirely on waste energy, entirely, within a matter of a couple of years. And I think that mining entirely on waste energy is also pro-social, pro-environmental. So it's kind of like the future. I agree with you about the present and the past, Alex.
So if we can dig a little bit deeper, and before we go into that, I want this panel to be more like a discussion, like a Twitter space. So please jump in and ask each other questions, ask me questions anytime. Let's dig a little bit deeper. So we talk about the past and the present, and Bitcoin mining is not there, or proof of work, the only proof of work, the only at scale proof of work mechanism left is not there. But then you also paint a future of this a green, very good for the grid, carbon neutral. What is missing to get there? And secondarily, maybe this is a question for both Troy and Alex, is what about the other blockchain application space regarding energy use as well as ESG type of applications? So maybe I will start with Troy, since can comment on what bridges from the present to the future. What is to say that maybe it's not going to be 100% coal-fired, 10 years from now?
Coal, here's why. We're really fortunate. It's because of the price curve on solar and the price curve on wind. Solar and wind are improving their efficiency and price at the pace of technology. So solar is now by far the cheapest. It's cheaper, in fact, to create brand new solar plants than merely to operate existing coal plants. Now, this isn't everywhere, of course, because it's not sunny everywhere. But in ideal conditions, brand new solar is cheaper than simply running coal. And it's less risky because your supply is known. It's the sun. Once you build it, your marginal cost is zero. So technology has brought us to this point. And what gets us to the future? What's the bridge? It's not necessarily anything intentional. It is the natural competitive nature of mining. It's the shrinking of those margins, and it's the supply of ASICs. If we are supply constrained on ASICs, it's going to hold us back. The other thing is, what brought me public in this space a year ago is, I invented a financial instrument whereby you can hold Bitcoin in a carbon neutral way by actually doing a bit of mining in proportion to your holdings. And I'm doing this through a hash rate future, but there are different ways to do it. So ESG pressures from the investment side is part of what pushes it there. And I'm talking to companies across the space. People don't want to put mines on coal. It's hard to raise money for that. Creates a backlash, right? Whereas there is a lot of public interest in mining on renewables and nuclear.
Alex, do you have any response or comments regarding that or other blockchain mechanisms?
Sure. I mean, I think having carbon neutral or on a future price basis, carbon neutral Bitcoin is a great thing. I would personally be a customer myself. I think that perhaps even more immediate and perhaps longer term, more systemic thing is to sort of cast our, to have a somewhat wider view on what Bitcoin has kicked off. Clara, as well as Alon earlier, very admirably pointed out that through applied mathematics, cryptography, in other words, we've been able to remove the intermediary in a limited set of transactions. So for financial transactions, those that pertain to value, we now have non-repudiability. We have all the things that are required to build trust. But as the events of this past week have illustrated, the scope of human agency is quite a bit larger than that narrow slice of trust that Bitcoin and blockchain has delivered. And as such, I want to return to what I think is the essential nature of governments, which is the ultimate intermediary. Let me use a somewhat mundane example. Who likes stop signs or stoplights? Nobody. Does it infringe on our freedoms? Absolutely it does. Who likes to stop at stoplights? I don't. Yet governments have installed them, presumably at our, with our agreement for the greater good. And I don't think that concept of the greater good has somehow disappeared over the past decade. Again, as the events of the past week have illustrated, I can guarantee you that nation states, that governments are going to get involved with crypto real big, real fast. So for Bitcoin purists like my good friend Bobby, I probably not a great thing. Bitcoin itself, besides the environmental aspect, is far from ideal in my estimation. The Gini coefficient some years ago, right? It's a measure of inequality. 0 being the most completely equal, 1 being completely unequal, presumably Satoshi himself possessing all the Bitcoin. It was estimated to be about 0.9 some years ago. I doubt that ratio has come down appreciably in the meantime. So quite apart from the environmental aspects, if you're okay with a society, just for a point of reference, mainland China and the United States are somewhere between 0.4 and 0.5 on the Gini coefficient scale. Bitcoin being at 0.9 points to a very, in my mind, dystopian future. So that reinforces my primary conviction, which is blockchain over the past decade has now presented us with a range of options. Instead of 0 or 1, on or off, we can now work our way through various scales of gray. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Nobody wants to go back to where it was just 0, where only the central bank could print money and only commercial banks can distribute it. But to go to the other extreme and say, let's dispense with all of that. Let's just go to Bitcoin and use that as some nation states have, I would point out, failing nation states have used as a sort of fiat or as a sort of national currency. I don't think as humans, we're ready for that. So I will go back to your point, James, which is, the recent, I won't call it an upgrade, I'll just call it a transition of Ethereum from a proof of work to proof of stake. Does it introduce centralization? Absolutely it does, right? But you know what it also did? It threw a lot of GPU miners out of work. And did that probably, in the short term at least, reduce electricity consumption? Absolutely. So centralization is, in my world at least, not automatically a bad word. It's how you use it, just as decentralization is not necessarily a good word. So maybe you can call me a relativist and somebody with no moral compass, but what I'm interested at the end of the day are actually human outcomes. Are we better off as individual entities, as societies, because of this technology, because of its employment in our society? or are we worse off? And a decade or so into my personal adventure with Bitcoin and with crypto and blockchain, I just have to humbly state that the jury is still out. I don't know, right? Now, I think this question has special meaning for Taiwan, because as a society, this island is also quite undecided. Do we want to be part of the greater China, or do we want to be a sort of non-official eternal ally of the United States with basically open-ended commitments from the United States? That's an open question that is definitely not going to be answered today, right? But again, to me, it's a matter of a question of how centralized or decentralized you want to be. So I think it's very deep, very meaningful. And my hope, if you allow me, James, to skip to one of your questions, is instead of what I want the Taiwan government to see or know about this, what I want the Taiwanese people to see and know about this is, in this decade, a decade into this crypto and blockchain adventure, there are actually deep, and if I may, Troy, I mean, there are philosophical implications for a society. And Troy, didn't mention that Reed College is also where Steve Jobs spent a few years of his life. So there's a lot of great and crazy ideas that happen there, Bitcoin being one of them. Yeah, so that's what I want to say about it.
Thank you, Alex. And I want to jump into the rabbit hole you just opened very soon, which is the irony of Taiwan and how that fits into the space. But let me turn this back to Troy. Do you have any response to the Gini index point that Alex raised, or I personally call it the darkness of Bitcoin? And secondarily, I do also want to dig slightly deeper onto this future you mentioned. That's regarding energy use, cost of solar. That's getting cheaper over time. I'm going to throw the geopolitical angle to this. Is 80%, 90% of global renewable supply chain is actually out of China? What if something happens geopolitically? Secondarily, over 90% of the mining equipment are designed and assembled in China. What if something happened to that? What if that happens? Then how would that impact the Bitcoin community or the operations of the network itself, as well as the energy future you just talked about? So two-phase questions. And then I want to go into the rabbit hole that Alex opened at the opening.
Yeah, well, I can't resist taking up what Alex said. I mean, first of all, your thoughts about throwing cold water on sort of the utopianism that sometimes accompanies crypto sales is welcome. And I don't share the political views of some of the purists that, we won't need states, for instance, that somehow Bitcoin is a form of governance that is complete. It clearly isn't to me. On the Gini coefficient, I don't have the stats on hand, but there are many different ways actually of measuring wealth inequality. And several of those are looking much better. And the Gini coefficient, if I recall, is dropping significantly. One of the things we can look at is just like number of wallets just keeps exploding. Obviously Satoshi's coins aren't moving, so that's staying concentrated. But it's also hard to measure because some of the biggest holders, as you know, are exchanges like yourself, and they don't represent one individual. So actually Nick Carter has done some great work sort of doing the deep dive on how distributed it is. But more deeply, philosophically, I agree with you. It's not, it's still highly concentrated relative to, I would say, a political philosopher's ideal. And for me, in part, it's like, yeah, look, that's not the responsibility of a protocol like Bitcoin. That's the responsibility of a society. We have to take care of each other. And we have to, what I think of is that the Cantillon effect, the ability to stand in front of the money printer, accelerates inequality. I read a book recently called Engine of Inequality about the Fed, about the Federal Reserve, right? The Federal Reserve actually creates inequality because it offers both access to the discount window and cheap loans to the richest, but it also enriches asset holders by creating inflation. So Bitcoin
Cantillon effect.
yeah, Bitcoin does not solve inequality, but it doesn't accelerate it, which is the system we have now. And I'm becoming more and more used to giving up on utopias and settling for less bad than now. And now, in terms of your other point about, what else? What are the dark spot? What is the darkness that comes with Bitcoin? And it's something you mentioned earlier, James. Other protocols not using energy. I think I'm happy with Ethereum's switch to proof of stake. And for that matter, everything other than Bitcoin, I think would be great if they all went to some consensus mechanism other than proof of work, whether it's like Filecoins or whatever. I think we only need one proof of work chain. We don't need more than one, first of all. But I do think proof of work provides a different security profile. And actually, and this is where probably, Alex, you're going to object, the potential to use energy in ways that are actually pro-social. So I'm glad that we have one that's like that, but I agree that I'm glad you're skeptical of this Pollyanna-ish, overly optimistic vision that we say Bitcoin fixes this in the community. Bitcoin doesn't fix everything. It doesn't fix human depravity, doesn't fix inequality. It doesn't do everything a government does, and governments are not going away. That's absurd. So I appreciate your realism and wisdom. Actually, really enjoyed that, and I endorse all of that. Sorry, James. I can't remember.
I have no quarrel with what you just said. It's just a slight modulation on the. I wouldn't call it Pollyannish, but it was, in my estimation, a little bit too rosy portrayal of Bitcoin's positive, impact on the environment. I mean, but I would argue, just as I would for gold, in the grand scheme of things, there is a societal role for gold, right? Whether it's emotional or financial. And as such, I would not in any way argue that gold mining should stop. It just as I would not argue that Bitcoin mining should stop. So yeah, as long as it's I think a pretty balanced view, that's exactly what I am as a business person and, as a person, basically. So yeah.
Life is full of trade-offs.
Exactly.
And you would build a hospital, you're going to use concrete. Concrete has a carbon footprint, right? It's like that for everything. All human activity has environmental impact. Absolutely. And the reason that Bitcoin, I didn't say this in the talk, but and the reason that Bitcoin comes in for special criticism is that people don't appreciate its value. So if it doesn't have any value, then why is it using any energy, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
We always begin the conversation there. Does it have value?
So I just got a read huge bolded letters from the team that we have about 20 minutes left. I would like to switch over to the point that Alex raised a little bit earlier, that this irony or the dilemma that Taiwan faces. And let me frame it a little bit more specifically. From my view, we have seen the separation of global supply chains. We have seen the separation of tech, like the CHIPS Act. And in the previous panels, discussions of the high-tech forum of this forum also talk about the same dynamic. How do you see that playing out in the crypto or blockchain space? And I'll target this question to Alex.
So I don't say this facetiously, and I do not mean to demean anybody either. So please take it as neutrally as you can. But basically, I believe in the past few days, CZ of Binance, which is the world's largest exchange, has more or less achieved what General Secretary Xi Jinping has laid out during the 20th Party Congress as his national and perhaps personal goals. So in a limited realm, right, I'm talking about crypto, I'm not talking about broader things, CZ has achieved a pole, a power center that is truly global in its scope and scale, yet more or less outside the control of the United States. I think that's a significant thing, and I think that's something that we should all let sink in. It's not good nor bad, it is. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for crypto? I mean, I think this is going to take quite some time to play out. But because crypto is a virtual phenomenon. CZ was able to accomplish this in the span of 5 years. When or if Xi Jinping is ever able to accomplish this on a much, much broader scale remains to be seen. And that's probably the biggest question of our lifetimes. So how, let's say, the United States government, but I think implied in that question, James, was how perhaps the government on this island grapples and, first of all, let it sink in, let it be understood that this is exactly what happened. I think the world is interested in checks and balances, just as the last 30 years has been a monopole world centered on Washington, D.C. That's not something the rest of the world would probably be prepared to accept on a long-term basis. And by the same logic, I don't think that in the crypto or Web3 or even Bitcoin world, the world is probably going to accept a monopole in the form of Binance and CZ. So that's the way I see it. And I'm pretty, as I said, agnostic and dispassionate about this, but I more or less think that's what has happened in the last few weeks. First in the crypto world in the last few days, but more broadly, in the larger framing in the geopolitical world. I mean, that's more or less what Xi Jinping has set out for himself.
Now, if I may, just to make this a little bit more complicated. So Xi Jinping stated, so it's a national priority that he stated in 2020. There's a cryptography law. Now, with the advent of the past 1 week, outside of the US is dominated by one single entity. How do you see that relates to the Gini index point that just raised earlier? Gini index is a concentration of economic power. But now we have a concentration of political or organizational power of the crypto space outside of the United States. So how do you think about that? And secondarily, to help some of the audience, aren't cryptos and blockchain inherently borderless? Why are we even talking about this, like countries and borders? Why shouldn't it, flow in and out of China? As Dr. K, I remember one of the audience raised that some of the mining went back to China. They can control it. How do you respond to that, Alex? And then maybe Troy, if you have some questions or comments on this as well.
So I think what we have come to realize, if we haven't already, is that crypto, for better or worse, is not borderless, nor is it truly faceless and nameless. It is very much, got delineated borders. Maybe that's on a virtual platform like ours or Binance, or it's got a face to it. I mean, unfortunately, you have to deal with my face today, but otherwise, on a more global scale, CZ's face is very prominently associated with it. So that's my point earlier about dealing with contradictions, and we should get used to it and perhaps even embrace it. I think by itself, it's not a good nor a bad thing. I think with the concentration of political power in the person of Xi Jinping after the 20th Party Congress, the concentration of market power in the person of CZ post the events of the past few days, the jury is out. We don't know if this is a better or worse world for all of us. But my only point that I'd like to get across today is it's a world that we should be fully cognizant and aware of.
Thank you. And I see small comment of Troy's.
Yeah,
if you want to comment on, yes.
I mean, I'm a Bitcoiner, and I think the lesson of this recent implosion is not your keys, not your coin. And Alex, your job is to sell people stuff and buy stuff from people, but not to hold their assets. And I hope the lesson that we learn is don't trust people like Alex, even if they're trustworthy, or CZ. Use them as a service to buy, but be your own bank. I've got those old slogans, be your own bank, send money peer to peer, and let's disintermediate the system of custodians as much as possible. Self-custody. So I'm not giving up on the dream, right? You give an elegant, very elegant parallel. I love the metaphor I loved following it, right? But the Bitcoiner inside me is screaming, no, we can still do it. Let's separate not just money from state, but money from cult of personality. Let's separate, let's restore a level of responsibility. Now, I want to go back, just if I can briefly, James, to an earlier question of yours, which is how dependent are we on this geopolitical, the supply chain stuff, both for renewables and for mining itself. And I think this is an Achilles heel for Bitcoin. By and large, I'm at this Bitcoin conference right now. Bitcoiners have greeted the news of the last few days with cheers. They are happy because they've been sounding the alarm that there are scams across the crypto industry for a long time. And they see this as vindication, rightly or wrongly, right? They see it as vindication. But Bitcoin has some Achilles heels. And one of those is in, the availability of ASICs being concentrated, right? And I'm very concerned with the geopolitical instability in your region of the world for far more deep reasons and obvious reasons than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is actually way down the list of reasons to worry about the instability in your region, right? The supply chains affect every aspect of our lives, not just the money. But that in particular is and always has been a weak point for Bitcoin. When I came to Bitcoin in 2011, part of the reason I didn't go all in is because I thought China would do a 51% attack and control it. For me. Why didn't they seize? Why didn't they seize these things like, 11 years ago? And
Hello. I think Troy. Oh, sorry, Troy. You just got cut off briefly. Continue. Thank you. I think Troy is muted. Troy, if you can click on the mute. Yes. Okay. Excellent. Yep.
Okay. There. So anyway, just to say, China has had the ability to 51% attack Bitcoin for almost all of its existence, but didn't. It would be a much easier way to do things than cut off the ASIC supply through actually controlling the flow of goods. But it has always been a threat to Bitcoin. And even though Bitcoin, I feel like, is the most resistant protocol to capture and centralization and attack, that is one of the weak points. Control the supply of ASICs. One of the things you'd have to do.
So in the interest of time, I want to turn it back to Alex. I think Alex has some comments, but let me ask you a very simple yes and no question. Let's say if all the chip designs are stopped, halted all of a sudden, and renewable energy production, 90% of China is halted for all of a sudden, can the Bitcoin network still operate?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we have all the existing ASICs.
The answer is
we have existing ASICs throughout the world, and we have energy all over the world. We have.
Thank you. But let's turn back to Alex. I think Alex has some points.
The answer, of course, is yes. That's the whole point about a decentralization and having no single point of failure. But at the same time, I would like to, perhaps because I live in Taiwan these days, remind everybody that Taiwan is not just about ASICs. There are 23.5 million human beings on this island that have their hopes and aspirations and their daily lives to look after. So in the event of geopolitical instability here, Crimea River, maybe some Bitcoin miners may not get their 3-nanometer chips, but you know what? There are probably bigger things that are awry at that point in time than Bitcoiners not being able to raise their hash rate. I think the message at the end of the day, whether it comes to the amount of decentralization in crypto, or for that matter in matters of life and death when it comes to geopolitics, to me, it's all about subtlety. It's all about appreciating the many, many gradations of black and white in this matter. It's not this or that. It's your choice anywhere between. This is a very coarse and imperfect analogy, but I think given the choice, if costs were equal, most people, when it came to light switches, would prefer perhaps a dimmer switch, the ability to turn things very, very finely brighter or darker, as opposed to a simple on-off switch. Of course, in reality, costs are not the same. That's why we don't have dimmers on every single light. But I think that is definitely true not for Bitcoin. Bitcoin, as Troy points out, and I very much agree with, there's really only need for one proof of work chain out there. Okay, so these suddenly unemployed Ether miners that went off and mined, ETH Classic, I think they probably have better things to do with their lives and perhaps their GPU cards. That's true of crypto. But you know what? It's even more true of everyday life. And for us here in Taiwan to see ourselves in black and white terms as, defending freedom and democracy or, whatever it is, to me is not only foolhardy, it is potentially fatal. So I think the lesson that at least Bitcoin and its offshoots and derivatives have taught me over the past decade is to have an appreciation for really, subtlety. And as long as the broad direction is one that we want to see, more decentralization, more options, don't be an absolutist on everything. So I think if we can approach our geopolitical situation here in Taiwan with such subtlety, I will posit to you that we run a much smaller or perhaps even negligible chance of having our Bitcoin mining chips, their supply being disrupted because of some sort of instability here.
Thank you. And we have about 7 minutes left. I want to jump into our last question, coming back to the title and related to one of the questions from the audience. If you could talk to policymakers and tech leaders, which are the audience in the audience today, what would you tell them? What does blockchain means for nations? And specifically to one of the questions from the audience, what are the national security implications of blockchain? Maybe Alex, you want to give us a stab first?
I was going to offer the stage to Troy, but I mean, again, I think this broader blockchain and crypto message is actually directed at populations, because at least in societies like Taiwan, populations decide what form of government and who in government, ultimately prevails. So to me, the big picture philosophical lesson from crypto is that our fate, whether it's our private keys, whether it's our financial assets, whether it's the direction of our society, it is in our own hands. Don't demonize anybody. Do not rely on anybody else. It's you. How you want to live your life is more or less in your own hands. The sort of practical and sort of action-oriented way to sort of familiarize yourself with this concept, of course, I'm biased, but buy some crypto, transfer some to your friends, receive some from your friends. And I'm not talking about on a platform like MyCoin or Coinbase. I'm talking about on-chain, right? And you will begin to realize what's really going on here. I will to my dying day, my last breath, remember when I received my first 1 BTC from Bobby. We had a lunch in early 2013, over which he told me to give him 400 RMB. We were both in Shanghai at that time, so roughly $60 US. And he says, "I'm going to sell you something." And he asked me to download some piece of software. Turned out to be Bitcoin QT, one of the original Bitcoin wallets. And it took about 3 days, right? Because the wallet had to download the entire blockchain, which was only about a gigabyte at that point in time. But when it finally registered and it said 1 BTC, I finally realized what was going on. And almost immediately, my immediate reaction literally was, the Chinese government is not going to like this. So,
Troy? Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a beautiful story, and I endorse that so strongly. And I endorse also what you said before about, Bitcoin, the ASIC supply being the last thing on the minds of not just the people of Taiwan, but all of us, honestly, about the consequences of geopolitical instability, and the importance of subtlety, as you put it, is overriding, absolutely overriding. Yeah, wanted to come back to, what was the question again, James? Because I had a thing. Oh yeah, how should governments think about it? Here's my thought, big thought.
Oh, what would you say to governments and tech leaders? Because we have a lot of tech leaders here.
So here's the thought. Here's the big thought. I am seeing innovations of the kind that I could not anticipate. Satoshi did not anticipate. No one anticipated it 2013 in the Bitcoin mining space, and and in Bitcoin itself. For instance, I'm working with a company that is using Bitcoin miner heat to distill water. You can't boil water with the heat of a chip, but you can if you put the water in a vacuum. That means you can make pure water wherever you have Bitcoin mining out of dirty water. Amazing. Another Bitcoin miner says, well, carbon capture, something we all need we all project that we're going to have carbon capture in 2050, from the ambient air. 90% of the cost of carbon capture of the sort we have now is powering fans to blow air through an aqueous solution. Guess what else uses lots of banks of fans to power air through an area? ASICs, Bitcoin miners. So we could use the ASIC exhaust to blow air through an aqueous solution, capture carbon out of the ambient air, make cement with it. Like, wow, mind-blowing idea. How many more ideas like that? Here we have two basic human needs: water, carbon capture. Another is powering new forms of energy, like OTEC, ocean thermal energy conversion, in tropical regions of the world in the ocean, taking advantage of differentials in temperature between the deep ocean and the surface ocean with a Rankine cycle, and using Bitcoin mining to monetize the experimentation at medium scale of those kinds of projects. These are sorts of things that lawmakers are not going to anticipate. Even technologists are not going to anticipate. If you can create an environment in which this kind of experimentation and innovation can happen while stopping people like Sam Bankman-Fried from hurting customers and ripping them off. If you can figure out how to regulate scams while allowing new technologies to flourish in ways that greatly address matters of deep human need in surprising and shocking ways, that's your task as a lawmaker. How to treat a technology to unlock human potential in ways that you cannot even foresee, while preventing people from being harmed and abused, which of course scammers have always been with us since the beginning of Bitcoin. They've always been there since the beginning, right? That feeling of getting that one BTC, part of that feeling is fear, because it's a bearer asset. You could lose it. And scammers, they can sense that fear and they want to take it from you because you have no recourse, right? So we need regulators to play that twofold role: protect people, allow innovation to happen.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And we have about 1 minute left. If people want to follow you or learn more about your work, where would they go?
Troy, you first, and maybe.
Okay. I pretty much live. I wasn't even on Twitter a year ago, a year and a half ago. Now I pretty much live on Twitter. I'm at the Tro Crow, TheTrocro. Please follow me there. You can DM me if you have your questions and we didn't get to them. Feel free to send them to me on Twitter. Follow up, and I will try to get back to you as best I can.
Thank you, Alex.
For me, I'm more or less non-existent on social media, just really friends and family. But I do have a service for those that are residents of Taiwan. It's a probably decent fiat to crypto on-ramp here called MyCoin.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, guys. It's been a great honor. I wish you could go for another hour, but we're out of time. I'll turn the podium back to Peggy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, James. We definitely feel the room got a little bit warmer after the conversation. Indeed, a great conversation exchange. Thank you so much, Troy and Alex and James. Well, and thank you everyone for staying with us until the end of the event. We know we ran a little bit over, but we do want to finish a few last things with you. First of all, we want to thank again for the committee team behind this event. Jamie and Joseph Rex from NATEA, and also special thanks to Ethan Su from DigiTimes, as well as Director Sun from NSTC. And of course, this event is a teamwork. So to all the NATEA members, event staff, and supporters who have worked very hard on this event for months. And of course, we wouldn't be here without you. So thank you for your participation and engagement. We hope you really enjoyed the event and learned a lot. So we want to ask you to take a few minutes and tell us what you think about today's event, so we can keep improving, right? We've done this 25 times. We'll probably do it another 25 years. So we want to definitely hear from you on what you think about the event. So if you can scan the QR code and fill out the survey for us, it will help us a lot. And we will select some lucky winners to give away these great books from our supporters. So please scan the QR code, fill out the survey. We will really appreciate your feedback. And thank you again. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful night, day, and a great weekend. And we'll see you next year. Bye. Hey, Jianming, if you can go back to the survey code slide, I think that will help people to get to it. Yeah, thank you.